Does your surname and lineage link back to the Anglo-Saxons who were instrumental in the creation of England? Well, these are 7 English surnames of Anglo-Saxon origin still in use today, from royal lineages to occupational necessities. And please let me know what your surname is in the comments below. Now quickly, before we get into the 7 names, I should note that during the Anglo-Saxon period, which lasted from roughly the end of Roman Britain in the 5th century AD to the Norman Conquest of 1066, English people didn't really have surnames like we do today. Most people just had a single given name and then sometimes a descriptive byname, like the Smith or the Red. Proper surnames like we have today only became common in England mainly between the 12th and 15th centuries. Yet all the surnames on the list are at least derived from the lineage of the Anglo-Saxons, Old English. And many connect to Anglo-Saxon royalty and nobility, and some even come directly from Anglo-Saxon personal names, which later became surnames. Now the first name on the list is Godwin or Godwin. It comes from the Anglo-Saxon personal name Godwin. God meaning good or God, plus win meaning friend. So the surname means something like good friend or friend of God. Now Godwin was one of the most prestigious names in pre-Norman England. A famous early bearer was Godwin, Earl of Wessex, who rose under the Danish King Canute to become one of the most powerful men in England. His family, the House of Godwin, was central to the final generation of Anglo-Saxon England. His daughter Edith married King Edward the Confessor, and his son Harold Godwinson, who was the last crowned Anglo-Saxon King of England, died at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, succeeded on the throne by William the Conqueror, of course. And unlike a lot of old English aristocratic names, many of which the Normans wiped out, Godwin survived. After the conquest, we see transitional forms such as Almar Filius Godini in Domesday-style records in 1086, and by the late 12th century, it looks like a hereditary family name, with Walter Godwin recorded in the Norfolk Pipe Rolls of 1177. So Godwin or Godwin is a key Anglo-Saxon name, deeply tied to Wessex, royal politics, and the last ruling elite of pre-conquest England. Now second on the list is Edmunds, built on one of the most powerful royal Anglo-Saxon names. It means son of Edmund, which itself comes from the Old English personal name Admund. Ad meaning wealth, fortune or prosperity, plus mund meaning protection or protector. So Edmund means something like wealth protector. And the name has very strong Anglo-Saxon connections. One of the most famous early bearers was St Edmund, or Edmund the Martyr, King of East Anglia. As detailed in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, he was killed by the great Viking army in 869 or 870, and later became one of the great royal saints of England. Another was Edmund Ironside, King of England in 1016, who fought fiercely against Canute during the Danish conquest before dying later that same year. And after the Norman Conquest, the personal name survived in Latinised forms such as Edmundus, then developed into hereditary surnames. An early example is Nicholas Edmundus, recorded in Cambridgeshire in 1210, with later medieval forms such as Simon Edmundi. So it's a surname where the modern family name quietly preserves one of the great heroic names of early England. Now the third name on the list is a bit of a different one, an occupational name, Smith, but a very common one and a very old one that is derived from Old English, and it's also recorded before the Norman Conquest of 1066. And Smith today is the most common surname across much of the English-speaking world, ranking first in the UK, US, Australia, Canada and New Zealand. Smith likely comes from this Old English word, meaning a smith or metal worker, and is probably connected to the Old English word smitten, meaning to strike or to smite. And in Anglo-Saxon England, a smith was not just an ordinary tradesman. He was essential to every settlement, from making domestic goods to forging weapons of war such as swords. Now in early records, the name was often Latinised as Faber, before settling into variations we recognise today. and one of the earliest bearers in recorded history is a man called Echard Smith, found in the Annals of Durham in 975 AD. It actually records a woman freeing her slaves, with Echard among them, with these people selling themselves into slavery to survive a famine in the evil days of 975. Yet at this point it was a byname, meaning something like Echard the Smith or the Smith. In the later medieval period, however, we find more surname bearers in a more recognised modern surname form, such as Philip Lee Smith in Huntingdonshire and William Lou Smith in Oxfordshire, both in 1273. So Smith is not glamorous in the royal sense, but is actually one of the most Anglo-Saxon names you can have, a working name born from Old English speech, village life, metalworking and survival. Now the fourth name on the list is probably the most royal name, has the most royal prestige around it, Edwards. It simply means the son of Edward, with Edward itself coming from the Old English or Old Anglo-Saxon name, Adweard. Ad meaning prosperity or fortune, plus weird meaning guardian. So Edwards means something like the son of the prosperity guardian. This was the royal name of the House of Wessex, carried by 3 kings of England before the Norman Conquest: Edward the Elder, son of Alfred the Great; Edward the Martyr, murdered in 978; and Edward the Confessor, who died in January 1066. The king whose death triggered the succession crisis that ended Anglo-Saxon England. And Edward is one of the few Old English names the Normans did not wipe out. Because the Confessor was venerated as a saint, the conquerors kept using it. It appears in the Domesday Book of 1086 in these forums, and 8 post-conquest kings were Edwards. That survival let it become a surname. One of the earliest bearers was William Edward, recorded in the Curia Rugus Rolls of Suffolk in 1219. And in fact, the name William only became common in Britain because of the Normans. Centuries later, Edwards has a strong second flowering in Wales, and today it's a very common surname in Wales and around places like Cardiff. Now, number 5 on the list is another occupational one, and another very common surname today, Wright. One of the great craftsmen's names of Anglo-Saxon England. It is recorded from around 700 AD and comes from this Old English word, which originally meant something like a worker or a maker, which over time came to mean a shaper of wood. Where the smith worked with metal, the wright worked timber, and in a world where houses, ships and ploughs were all built of wood, he was indispensable. Like Smith, it began as the occupational byname, like someone the Wright, before becoming a surname. Medieval bearers include Pater Luricht in Sussex in 1214 and Robert Luricht in Essex in 1255. And here's the fascinating part. Wright is a story of Anglo-Saxon survival against Norman pressure. After 1066, the French word we know as carpenter today slowly replaced the meaning of wright in everyday language. But the Old English word held its ground in the north and in Scotland, where wright still means a skilled woodworker. It also survives hidden inside names we all know today, such as Cartwright and Wainwright, and even in playwright, a maker of plays. So Wright is one of those names that carries a whole Anglo-Saxon world inside. Makers, builders, timber ships, and practical village life. Now another interesting name in number 6 on the list is Harding, which comes from the Old English word herding, which may have been pronounced something like Hiarding, meaning the hard won, a derivative of the Old English word herd or hiard, meaning hard or brave. And in Anglo-Saxon poetry, variations of the word often meant a warrior or hero. The name was in genuine use before the conquest as well, as the Domesday records have it in various different forms, from Harding to Hardingus. And one of the most famous early lines begins with an Anglo-Saxon nobleman in Stoller, called Adnoth or Adnoth, the constable, who died in 1068. He was a high royal official and master of the horse, to both Edward the Confessor and Harold Godwinson. His son Harding Fitz Adnoth became Sheriff of Bristol, and one of his grandsons was Robert Fitzharding, ancestor of the Berkeley family. Another interesting bearer was Stephen Harding, an English monk born in around 1060, who went on to be honoured as a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. And finally we have King, another powerful Anglo-Saxon rooted surname that is very common today, of course. It comes from this Old English word, meaning king, ruler, or emperor. But despite its name, it usually does not mean literal royal descent. In most cases, it was a nickname or byname. Someone acted in a kingly way, played the king in a pageant, held a ceremonial role in a festival, or worked in connection with a royal household, was often dubbed the king. And one of the earliest bearers was Aelwyn C. Kung, recorded in Devon in 1050, before the Norman Conquest. He's especially interesting because Aelwyn is itself an Anglo-Saxon personal name. So this looks like a man carrying king as an Old English byname, before surnames had become fixed. After the Norman Conquest though, and into the later medieval period, it becomes easier to trace as a hereditary surname we would recognise today. Geoffrey King appears in Cambridgeshire in 1177, and Wullericus Lou King in Suffolk in 1182. So King is an ancient English nickname, born from the Anglo-Saxon lineage and medieval village culture, which later became fixed as the family name we recognise today. Now there are many others that just missed out, including other Anglo-Saxon royal names such as Alfred, Edgar, Oswald, Ethelstan and Ethelred, although some are less common as surnames today, of course. And there are also a lot of strong Old English names that are very common today, such as Priest, Baker, White, Wood, and many others, which I might cover in a future video. And let me know in the comments below if you would like to see a follow-up video around this topic in general and what your surname and ancestry is, and I'll try and cover it in a future video. And we do know that the Anglo-Saxons brought Germanic DNA into England. But what are the DNA differences between Germanic and Celtic DNA? Well, to find out, please click here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and hit the bell, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.